Good morning, all of you. Students, as you know that all living organisms have a lifespan after which they die. That means for a certain period of time, all living things survive and after that they will die. That means no organism lives forever. However, all living organisms are able to produce more of their own kind before they die. That means before their death, they produce more of their own kind. This ability to reproduce is a common characteristic of all living organisms. The process by which living organisms can produce more of their own kind is known as reproduction, and today I am going to start the chapter Reproduction in Plants. One more time, I want to explain the process of reproduction. It is the process by which all living organisms, they may be plants or animals, can produce more of their own kind. This is known as reproduction. The mechanism of reproduction is different for different types of living organisms. Some of the plants grow with their seeds and others with their different parts of plants. That means there are different methods of reproduction for different types of living organisms. Now we will discuss about the process of reproduction for plants. How do plants reproduce? That means how do they produce uh, of their own kind, more of their own kind. Before we study that, let us find out more about the parts of a flowering plant. Roots, stem and leaves are known as the vegetative parts of a plants, and it is the flowers that are the reproductive parts of a plant. That means there are two types of parts of plant. Flower is the reproductive part of the plant and other parts like leaf, stem and root are the vegetative part of the plant. Flowers changes into fruits which contain seeds, and when seeds germinate they form new plants. In flowering plants, reproduction takes place in this way. But what about non-flowering plant? We will discuss it in this chapter. Now, types of reproduction in plants. The methods of reproduction in plants are generally grouped into two main types: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. That means there are two methods of reproduction in plants: sexual and asexual reproduction. Now, what is asexual reproduction? It is the reproduction in which an individual can reproduce on its own without the involvement of another individual of the same species. There is no involvement of two individuals. It can be done by only one individual, and only one individual can reproduce without the involvement of another one. For example, the division of a bacterial cell into two daughter cells is an example of asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is not limited to single celled organisms. Most plants have the ability to reproduce asexually. Now, how does asexual reproduction takes place in different organisms? We will discuss it with some of the examples. The first one is budding. Some organisms like yeast reproduce asexually through budding. Yeast is a unicellular organism. To reproduce asexually, it produces an outgrowth called a bud. The nucleus in the yeast cell also divides into two daughter nuclei. Out of these, one nucleus remains in the parent cell while the other moves to the bud. The bud may grow and get detached from the parent cell. Sometimes another bud arises from the first bud and soon a chain of buds gets formed. This process results in the production of a number of yeast cells in a short period of time. Now, next type of asexual reproduction in non-flowering plant is fragmentation. Students, you may have observed steamy green patches on the ground near ponds and other water bodies having stagnant water. Where their water is still stagnant water, you have seen the green patches. If you will try to lift them with a stick, you will see a long, fine, green thread like structures. These are the algae. One such type of alga is Spirogyra. It reproduces asexually by fragmentation. A Spirogyra filament breaks up into two or more fragments. These fragments grow and develop into new individuals. As this process continues, the whole pond may get covered by a green scum. Next type is spore formation. Students, you have observed a cottony growth on stale bread or some spoiled food stuffs. It does not take long for this cottony growth to turn into minute pinhead-like structures of bread mold. These are called sporangia, the pinhead structure. When you see the patches clearly, the cotton growth, try to see it, you will find that there is a minute pinhead like structures. These are bread molds, and that pinhead like structure is known as sporangia, as they have spores in them. The sporangia, the pinhead like structures, contains the spores of the bread mold. The spores are thick-walled, microscopic or sexually reproducing bodies. They are carried by wind and keep floating in air. They germinate when they find a suitable medium to grow. Mosses and ferns also reproduce through production of spores. These are examples of non-flowering plants that do not produce seeds, and they reproduce by these processes like budding, fragmentation and spore formation. So that's all for today, students. Thank you. Have a nice day.